Riven adjusted the strap of his translator device as he stepped onto the glowing bluegrass of Nerith Prime. It was his third alien world this year, but something about this one felt different. The wind smelled like crushed flowers, and the sky had 3 soft moons hanging like lanterns. He was here for a peaceful trade agreement. Nothing more, nothing less. The Nerethians were elegant beings, tall and smooth-skinned, with long ears and eyes that shimmered like stars. Their language wasn't just words, it was feelings, colors, tone, movement. That's why the translator was so important. Without it, a simple thank you could accidentally mean I challenge you to a duel or worse. He walked through the tribal gate, where 2 warriors stood guard, their staffs glowing faintly. Inside, fires crackled in silver pits, and alien children ran laughing between tall stone carvings. At the center of the village stood a gathering circle, where the elder waited beside his daughter, Sarathil. She was dressed in flowing silks that moved like water, her silver markings glinting under the twin suns. Riven bowed politely, letting the translator do the talking. "Greetings, respected ones. I come in peace on behalf of the United Human Colonies," he said. The elder gave a warm smile, nodding to his daughter. Sarathel stepped forward, speaking softly, her voice melodic. The translator buzzed and translated, "Welcome, human. Do you find our world beautiful?" Riven smiled. "It's one of the most peaceful I've seen," the device chirped again. "I offer myself in return for your words." Riven blinked, confused. That couldn't be right, could it? "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" he asked, chuckling. Sarathil tilted her head and repeated the phrase with a warm smile. Slower this time, the translator said the same thing. "I offer myself in return for your words." Riven laughed awkwardly. "Maybe it means something else in your culture." He tried to wave it off, thinking it was a poetic phrase. He replied, "I accept your hospitality." The translator responded for him, "I accept your bonding." Everyone around the fire gasped. The elder smiled even wider. Sarathil bowed deeply, placing her hand gently on her own chest. The other villagers began to hum a low, tunesome kind of chant. Riven's face turned pale. "What did I just say?" he whispered to himself. He tapped the translator, trying to replay the log, but it glitched with a soft beep and error message. The device had overheated. Sarathil reached out and touched his arm gently. "Tonight," she said in her native language voice, soft like a song. The translator barely managed to output, "We meet as bonded under the stars." Then it shut off completely. Riven was frozen, unsure what to do. His mission was simple: just deliver trade terms, offer peaceful relations, and go home. But now it looked like he had agreed to something far bigger. That night, while Riven sat inside the guest tent, gifts began to arrive. Baskets of fruit, folded robes, small silver coins, and scented oil. Then, soft footsteps outside. He peeked through the cloth and saw Sarathil standing alone, holding a candle made of glowing stone. She walked in slowly, her face calm, but her hands shaking slightly. "Is this normal?" Riven asked aloud, even though no one would answer. The translator lay dead on the table, blinking red in silence. Sarathil placed the candle on the ground and sat before him. She pulled a string on her robe, letting it fall to her shoulders, revealing a body decorated with silver ink and ceremonial symbols. She whispered something again, something that made her eyes shimmer with nervous hope. Riven didn't understand a word, but he felt it. She thought he understood. She believed. This was what he wanted, but he wasn't sure what she had truly heard when he spoke. And without the translator, there was no way to fix it now. He slowly reached out and gently took her hand. He could have pulled away. He could have said no. But instead, he whispered, "What did I say to you today?" Sarathil leaned forward, touched her forehead to his chest, and said, You said you choose me before all things. Riven closed his eyes. The deal was simple till the words changed everything. Asterisk, the soft glow of the ceremonial candle danced across Seraphil's skin as she looked at him with quiet expectation, her silver markings gleaming like stars. Riven sat frozen, heart pounding, thoughts racing. She had misunderstood him more, maybe he had misunderstood her. But now it was too late to ask questions, too late to explain. The translator was dead, and the only thing between them was silence, breath, and the hum of distant drums. Seraphil gently placed her other hand over his, her grip light, almost trembling. There was no force, no pressure. Only the weight of culture he did not yet understand. Riven's mind screamed for him to stop, to step away, to signal for help. But his body stayed still. His voice gone, she smiled softly, eyes shimmering as if sensing his confusion and offering comfort in return. Outside the tent, the singing grew louder, rhythmic and haunting, a sacred sound not of celebration, but of promise. Inside, Seraphil leaned closer, her lips barely apart, and whispered a single word. Riven didn't know what it meant, but it sounded like surrender or trust. It shook something inside him, something deeper than fear or desire, something human. When her fingers touched his face, he didn't pull back. She was warm, delicate, and unsure, not the proud, graceful daughter of a chieftain, but someone real. Someone who thought he had chosen her. He hadn't meant to, but did it matter now? She believed it, and she wanted it to be true. Still, he had a duty to be honest, to make things clear. But how? The translator was dead, and words were dangerous here. The wrong sound, the wrong look, the wrong breath could mean anything. Seraphil gently moved closer, her breath brushing his skin. And in that moment, Riven made a choice. He didn't speak, didn't resist. Instead, Kay closed his eyes and let the silence carry them both. They moved slowly, carefully, as if every motion was part of a ceremony older than time. There was no lust, only something strangely pure, full of awe and confusion mixed together. And when it ended, they lay in quiet stillness, her head resting gently against his shoulder. He stared. At the top of the tent, unable to sleep, unable to understand what he had just done. The morning came with soft light and soft voices outside. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake her, but she was already awake, watching him with a peaceful smile. She reached over, touched his chest, and traced a symbol with her finger, a mark of bonding. He forced a smile in return, but inside, a storm was building. He slipped out of the tent and grabbed the translator, trying to fix it. He needed to know what had really been said, what promises were made without him knowing. He connected the wires, powered it up, but the logs were corrupted. The message it had translated last night, the one that started all this, was gone. Only fragments remained, broken sentences, out of order. One phrase played back in a broken voice, "I accept your bonding." Then static. Riven let out a breath, hands on his face. He looked up as a group of villagers approached the tent, carrying flowers, cloaks, and a carved necklace. One of them placed the necklace around his neck. Without a word, another patted his back and smiled proudly. And behind them, the elder appeared, holding a staff wrapped in silver thread. Seraphil stood beside her father, her expression calm, eyes filled with trust. The elder raised his staff and spoke in his language. The translator, still glitchy, offered a rough translation. "You are now part of our blood, bonded by choice and spirit." Riven's lips parted, but no words came out. The moment was already too big, too far gone, and somewhere inside. He knew there was no turning back now. He had crossed a line without knowing, and the whole tribe had seen it as sacred. What started as a simple trade mission had become a vow. Not made with understanding, but sealed by silence and a broken machine. And Seraphil, She didn't regret it, not even for a second. But Riven? He wasn't sure what he felt anymore, only that he had said yes to something he hadn't meant. And someone had given everything in return. Asterisk. Riven sat alone by the river, his boots half soaked in glowing water that shimmered like starlight. The morning ceremony was over. The villagers had returned to their homes, and Serathil had gone to prepare for something they called the blessing walk. He had nodded along as if he understood, but he didn't. He understood nothing, and worse, he had no way of asking without causing offense. The translator had rebooted, barely, but every word it translated now came out slow. Robotic, often wrong, he tried speaking into it again. What is the blessing walk? It replied, prepare your bride for offering. His heart dropped. This wasn't just a cultural misunderstanding anymore. This was something sacred to them, maybe even a full marriage ritual. And he was at the center of it, without ever agreeing. To be, he hadn't meant to take anything from her. Not her body, not her future, but in the eyes of her people, he had already done both. He picked up a small stone and threw it into the river, watching the ripples fade. How could a few wrong? Words changed the path of an entire life. He wasn't angry at her. No, she had done what she thought was right. It was him. He had smiled, bowed, trusted a machine to carry his meaning. And now here he was. Footsteps behind him made him turn. Serathil stood there, dressed in soft, white robes with golden lines along the edges. She looked breathtaking, strong and calm, but her eyes searched his face with worry. She held out something smaller, crystal shard. Glowing softly, she placed it in his hand. Then gently pressed her forehead to his chest, just over his heart. He didn't move, didn't speak. He didn't want to lie to her, but he didn't want to hurt her either. She said a phrase, slowly. Hoping the translator would help, it buzzed to life, and the words came through. You do not smile now. Do you regret choosing me? He froze, his throat tightened. She was asking not just a question, but the question. And suddenly, his silence felt cruel. No, he whispered, then repeated it louder. No. I don't regret you. The translator tried its best. I hold no sorrow for the bonding. She smiled, relieved, and placed her hand gently on his cheek, then said something else, long and soft. Her voice like wind through feathers. The translator buzzed again and said, Tonight we finish the eth. Vow under the moons. Riven blinked, his heart skipping. No, he said quickly, holding up a hand. She tilted her head, confused, her smile fading. I didn't mean to, he began. But the translator gave up again, flickering and hissing. All she heard was static and broken words. She stepped back slowly, face pale. He reached out. But she turned away, walking back into the village. The translator flickered again, catching one last phrase from her as she disappeared into the trees. You said you chose me, but now you pull away. Did I shame you? Riven sat down hard, the stone still glowing in his hand. He stared at the horizon, unsure what was right anymore. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but the truth was, part of him didn't want to undo it. He just didn't know. If he deserved her trust, far above, the twin moons began to rise. And Riven knew that if he didn't fix this soon, he would lose her forever. Not because of hatred, but because of silence. Asterisk, the fire pit crackled in the village center. But Riven didn't feel its warmth. He sat on a stone bench as shadows danced. Across the carvings behind him, around him, Nerethians moved gracefully, humming low songs, preparing for the night's sacred bonding ritual. They called it Moonfold, a ceremony that sealed a pair under the witness of the twin moons. He hadn't agreed, but no one had asked again. They thought he already had. Serathil had not spoken to him since earlier that day. She walked past him once, eyes lowered. Carrying a silver tray of flowers, her steps were calm, but her tail, thin and delicate, flicked in nervous rhythm behind her. She was hurt, maybe ashamed, maybe even afraid, and he couldn't blame her. She had opened herself completely to a man she barely knew. And now he was pulling away without saying why. The translator still didn't work right. It translated simple things, like food orders and greetings, but every time he tried to speak about the mistake, about the miscommunication, the device spat out strange phrases. Your shame rests on my skin. I break your vow and bless another. None of it made sense. But all of it made everything worse. An elder approached, his robe embroidered with swirling stars. He handed Riven a robe of his own. Soft and pale. This is for the Union, the translator managed. Riven stood there, frozen, holding the garment. Like a curse, he wanted to say no, but all eyes were on him. He felt trapped by tradition, by silence, by a failure in technology that had changed lives forever. But what was worse was this quiet feeling growing inside him. A part of him didn't want to stop the ceremony. A part of him had felt something in her touch, her voice, the way she had trusted him without question, and that part whispered, maybe this wasn't all wrong. When the moons rose high, drums began to beat. The villagers formed a circle, humming a melody that felt ancient. Serathil stood at one end, draped in soft light, her face unreadable. Riven was led to the center, the robe placed over his shoulders. He met her eyes only once long enough to see she wasn't angry, just waiting, just hoping. The elder raised a staff and spoke. The translator buzzed slowly in this sacred moment under the twin lights. The chosen two will complete the bond. Riven's heart thundered in his chest. He opened his mouth, ready to speak, to stop it, to explain, but the translator blinked red again. Dead silence. Serathil stepped forward. Holding a silver thread between her fingers, she wrapped one end around her own wrist, then reached for his hand. She paused, waiting, still giving him a choice. Even now, all he had to do was step back, shake his head, and it would all end. But Riven didn't move. Instead, he let her tie the thread around his wrist. The crowd began to chant softly, a glow rising from the stones beneath them. Serathil whispered something, and though the translator gave no reply, Riven understood. She had forgiven him, even without words. She had chosen to trust him again. And somehow, that felt heavier than any punishment. As the ritual ended, the crowd cheered quietly. Not loud or wild, just a soft wave of approval. Riven stood there beside her, her hand still in his. And for the first time that night, he whispered, not to the translator, not to the sky, but directly to her, I'm sorry I didn't understand before. She didn't respond in words. She simply rested her head lightly on his shoulder. And in that moment, he stopped thinking of it as a mistake. Asterisk. The morning air carried a strange tension, sharp like electricity before a storm. Riven stood by the edge of the village, watching a human shuttle descend through the clouds. It was sleek, gray, and humming with quiet power, nothing like the glowing stones and soft lights of Nerith Prime. He knew what it meant. The outpost had found out. 2 officers stepped out, wearing clean uniforms and cold expressions. Behind them, a medic and an AI translator unit. Fully upgraded, Riven's heart sank. This wasn't just a check-in. This was an investigation. They walked straight toward him, their boots pressing hard into the soft alien soil. Lieutenant Riven Hayes, one of them said, voice clipped and sharp. You're to give a full statement about your interaction with a native female immediately. The translator unit floated beside them, scanning everything, recording everything. Serathil appeared behind him. Confused by their arrival, she reached for his hand. But he gently stepped forward. The older officer narrowed his eyes. She's bonded to you, he asked. Riven replied, by choice. Riven opened his mouth, then hesitated. The question was simple, but the truth was tangled. It was unintentional at first, he admitted. The younger officer glanced at the translator unit, then back at Riven. Then we may have a problem. Sarah Thiel stepped forward and spoke quickly in her own language. Her voice firm. The AI translator responded in perfect English. He chose me under the twin moons, before the circle, before the gods. I am not his prisoner. I am his. The words echoed like a quiet storm. Even the officers paused. The medic spoke next, softer. Consent isn't just cultural, Lieutenant. It's universal. Riven looked at Sarathil, then back at them. She believes I chose her, and maybe I did, he said, voice low, but not because I understood the rules, not at first. They all stood in silence for a moment. Then the older officer pulled out a small recording disc. We'll take statements separately, human and native, and then decide whether this falls under cultural error or legal breach. Sarathil didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer to Riven, resting her hand on his chest. Then she looked at the officers and said something in her tongue that didn't need a translation. Even the humans understood it. She wasn't backing down. Riven gave his statement first. He explained everything: his mission, the translation glitch, the misinterpreted phrases, the sacred bonding, the ceremony under the moons. He didn't hide anything, not even his confusion, not even the night in the tent when it was Sarathil's turn. She didn't speak much, but when she did, the AI translated with perfect clarity. He spoke with the voice of the stars, and I heard my name in his breath. I gave myself not because he asked, but because I wanted. He could have refused many times, but he never did. And when I looked into his eyes, I saw no lies. Riven listened, chest heavy, throat dry. It wasn't just about words anymore. It was about meaning, and in her world, meaning didn't need perfect translation. The officers returned to the shuttle, saying they'd report to command. They left behind a warning. If she ever claims coercion, you'll be court-martialed. Hayes, Riven only nodded as the shuttle rose and vanished into the sky. Sarathil touched his arm gently. She didn't ask what they said. She only looked up at him with soft eyes and whispered her own language. The translator remained silent, but Riven didn't need it anymore. He finally understood. He was no longer just a guest here. He was part of her story now, and the rest of the galaxy would have to catch up. Riven sat inside the ancient stone library of the village. Its tall arches covered with glowing moss and floating dust. The translator lay open in pieces on the table. Before him, wires exposed, memory core pulled free. He had spent hours working, not to escape what happened, but to finally understand it. He didn't want another guess, another mistake. He wanted the truth. Even if it hurt, with a deep breath, he connected the memory crystal and began playing the recordings. Tiny blue images hovered above the table, showing the exact moment it all changed. Her voice, soft and calm, echoing his own words and response. Translated with just a blink of delay. But then, the error happened. She had said something poetic, something about stars and spirit, and the device had turned it into, "I offer myself to you forever." Riven flinched. That wasn't her offer. That was the translator forcing meaning where there was only warmth. He watched himself smile, nod, and reply, "Thank you for your kindness." But the machine had spoken different words. "I accept your bonding." He felt sick. Not because she had misunderstood, but because he hadn't known until now what his words had cost. She had believed it was a proposal, sacred and real, and she had stepped forward, ready to give her life, her body, her future based on a line neither of them saw coming. Behind him, Sarathil entered quietly, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. She looked at the images, still floating in the air, then at his face. "I wanted to understand," he said, voice low. I thought I needed the truth, but now that I see it, I don't know what to feel. She moved closer, her eyes calm. She pointed to the glowing moment when she had placed her hand on his chest. "Here," she said in her native tongue. The translator stuttered, then translated slowly. "I gave myself not to your words, but to your heart." He looked at her, confused. "You knew?" She nodded slightly, then sat beside him, her hand resting on his. "I heard your voice, not your machine," she whispered. "You looked at me like no one ever did, not like property, not like a prize, but like a person." Riven swallowed hard. "I thought I was the one who misunderstood everything." He said, "You did," she replied, "but not the part that mattered." They sat in silence for a while, the machine humming softly. She took the memory crystal, turned it off, and gently pressed it into his palm. "Let the past rest," she whispered. "I do not want your guilt. I want your truth." He stared at her, at the woman who had trusted him through every broken phrase, every mistake. He had thought this was a story about an accident, but maybe it was something else now. Maybe it was a beginning not built on perfect understanding, but real feeling. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. She smiled, tired but warm. "You didn't," she whispered. "You stayed." In a world where words had failed them, that was the one truth they both understood. The village lights dimmed as night fell, the twin moons rising slow and silver behind drifting clouds. Riven stood alone near the cliffside temple, the wind cold against his face. He held a small data scroll in his hand. Sent from the human outpost that morning, inside it were his transfer orders. Command had offered to relocate him far away from Nerith Prime, far from Sarathil, far from everything that had happened. All he had to do was board the next transport and go. No questions, no punishment, just distance. He had stared at the scroll for hours, reading the same words again and again. It was a clean way out. But it didn't feel clean. It felt hollow. Behind him, footsteps approached, soft and hesitant. He didn't turn. He already knew it was her. Sarathil stopped. A few feet away, silent, waiting. She didn't ask him to stay. She didn't beg or cry. She simply stood there, the way she always did, brave, open, real. "I thought leaving would fix it," Riven said quietly, "but it doesn't." He turned around and looked at her. "Because you're not the mistake." She stepped closer, her eyes bright under the moonlight. "You don't belong here," she whispered. Riven gave a small smile. "Maybe I don't," he said, "but I do belong with you." The wind caught her hair as she blinked slowly, unsure whether to believe him. "I didn't understand what I said to you that first day," he continued, voice low. "But now, if I say those words again, it will be by choice, not error." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I accept our bond," he said, this time without the translator, without the machine, only him and her. And the night her breath caught, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she whispered something too quiet for translation, but Riven didn't need it. He saw it in her eyes, felt it in her fingers tightening around his, down in the village. The drums began to beat. Not a ritual this time, not a demand. Just music, carried on the wind. They walked back slowly, side by side, saying nothing more. There were no perfect words, no poetic speeches, only steps taken together, and for the first time since his arrival, Riven didn't feel like a guest anymore. He felt home.